Hello everyone, I'm Sam and I talk about my experiences as a queer person with chronic illness. If that sounds like something you want to hear more about, then please do click subscribe. Today I actually want to talk about them both and how they intersect. I've kind of spoken about this briefly when I made a video about how my chronic illness is making my dysphoria worse, which I'll link in a card, but in this video I want to talk about it in a lot more depth. I want to start by addressing that obviously this is entirely just from my own experiences. I'll try and touch on as many different things as possible, but I can only speak from what I personally know. With me, that's mostly how transitioning has affected my chronic pain and fatigue, but I'll try and touch upon as many other things as possible. I personally think there's about 7 solid ways in which they interact, with quite a few more less tangible ones. I'm going to talk about them all a little bit and try and put in a few hints and tips that I've learned along the way as well. The first one I want to talk about is tiredness around medical appointments. Sort of going chronologically, that's one of the first things you're going to experience as you're starting out. And depending on what processes you go through, there's quite a lot of appointments to get through. This can be tiring for anybody, but if you are already the sort of person that has to go to a lot of different medical appointments, or it's something that you personally find really draining, it can feel like quite a lot. I also find that within trans healthcare, both privately but especially publicly, there's a lot of self-advocacy involved as well, which can be quite difficult to navigate. For our second point, I want to talk about hormonal changes and their impact. If you decide that you want to medically transition and part of that includes taking hormones, it obviously does take quite a toll on your body. There's a chance that it will exacerbate some symptoms you already experience, but I would personally say it's totally worth it if it's something that you want and feel that you need for yourself. I was quite lucky and felt that I was on the whole kind of unaffected, but I have heard from other people that sometimes their fatigue or their pain was a bit exacerbated. The only time I would say that I experienced anything was when my hormone levels were dropping and I would kind of maybe have a low mood or feel a bit off, but that's quite a universal thing. It's not necessarily specific to people with chronic illnesses or disabilities. Next up is not being able to have the ability or strength to get to where you want to be physically. Now, a huge part of transitioning for a lot of people is the effects that it has on their body and how much it changes. With a lot of changes with hormones, they kind of happen at their own will. However, when it comes to physique-specific things, when you're on testosterone, for example, it can change your body, your fat distribution will change over the years, but if you want to make any major changes, if you want to see any big physique changes, it does involve a lot of work. A lot of trans people you're going to see online go through these incredible transformations and they put so much work and effort into it. But for certain people with certain chronic illnesses and disabilities, their ability to get to a place like that is going to be significantly impeded and made a lot harder. Not only can not having the strength or ability to do certain things make the process really, really slow for you or harder, more frustrating at times, it can also take you back sometimes. For example, for me, I used to work a really, really physical job before my symptoms got worse. I was keeping off weight really, really easily and I didn't realise how much of that my job had to play. So when I then left my physical job and ended up in an office job, then also lockdowns happened, I gained a lot of weight and I didn't really realise just how hard it was going to be to shift it. Now, weight gain is difficult for a lot of people, but as any trans-mass people may know, if your hips are a sensitive point, if you're the sort of person that gains all their weight in their hips, like me, it has been a particularly challenging thing. Next up, chronic illnesses and disabilities can have an effect on your ability or your recovery times around surgeries. Depending on what it is that you're affected by, it may affect your ability to have surgery at all, or your recovery times, or your risk of complication. There are people out there who aren't able to have their life-affirming surgeries purely because they're really discouraged by their doctors, or they're personally not willing to face all the side effects that can happen in relation to their medical conditions that they already have. For myself, I found top surgery to be quite rough in terms of pain. I was in a lot of pain, I got given really strong painkillers, I had opioids for the first time in my life. And I didn't know at the time, and I found out a few years later that I have fibromyalgia, and in hindsight it makes a lot of sense that it was quite painful for me. In terms of lower surgery, I've not had it yet, but I'd be lying if I said that my considerations between phalloplasty and meta weren't kind of linked to the intensity of the surgeries, recovery times, likelihoods of complications. Sure, there are certain things about phalloplasty, especially in terms of functionality, that I would love, but personally for me, is that worth how difficult it's going to be for my body to go through? Unfortunately not. Next up, looking a little bit more logistically, is the costs around medical treatment. I'm going to speak about the UK specifically because this is where I live and where I know most about. If you choose to take HRT, it will incur some costs. Depending on your financial situation, it might have quite a bit of an impact on you, especially if you're already taking a lot of other medicine that you have to pay for. There are, however, actually quite a few options for things you can do about that though. First of all, you can ask GPs to give you as much as possible of your HRT in one go. depending on your GP and a little bit of luck, you might get between 3 to 6 months worth of medicine under one prescription. So you'll pay the £9 whatever that it costs, and you will have months and months rather than having to pay the £9 for every single injection. If you have a lot of other prescribed medicine and your costs are racking up, you can also get a prepayment card in the UK. You essentially pay £100 for the whole year and you don't need to pay your prescriptions anymore. Now £100 is a lot of money, but there are going to be people that spend that much on their prescriptions already, so once you add HRT to it, it can be really worth it to get one of those. Lastly, again, it really depends on your personal situation, but you might actually be exempt from paying altogether. There is a card that you can get, and I'm pretty sure if you just sort of Google it, it will come up over there. But I'll try and pop down a link below as well so that you can have a look to see if you are eligible. Next up, we have got every non-trans related appointment becoming about being trans. Now, I'm speaking about this with a little bit of annoyance because many people, like myself, when they have chronic illnesses, see doctors a lot. And I find that if the doctor knows that I'm trans, suddenly, no matter what I'm there for, that's what my appointments become about. And I know that I'm not the only one in this situation because I have heard this complaint so many times. In fact, I might make an entire video about it. It's crazy how many times I've been inappropriately asked questions. I totally understand if there's something going on where my genitals are actually relevant or the scars on my chest do need to be questioned. Sometimes they need to know what medicine you're on, but when people ask more and more questions that are really not related to what I'm there for, it can be really annoying. This can often waste precious appointment time, but also really delay diagnoses when they start to focus on the thing that I'm not even there for. I don't necessarily have a whole host of tips and advice for this one. This is something that I'm still navigating, but I've learned that you just have to be quite firm and just refuse to give any information that you don't feel comfortable with. If you're really feeling wild, you can also ask them why they're asking. Sometimes it is relevant, really, even when you think it might not be, but if you really think someone's overstepping it, it is your body and you only share as much as you want to. And lastly, let's finish off with a slightly awkward one. It is binding and packing to medical appointments. I was privileged enough in that I didn't wear a binder for too long before I actually had top surgery. However, I did have quite a few appointments where I was still binding, and to be honest, I found that all the healthcare professionals were pretty good about it. They've usually been really understanding, and I have had scans and all sorts done while still wearing my binder. But I can't deny that the anxiety of it definitely made the situation far worse than it actually ended up being in the end. In terms of packing, it's something that I choose to do all of the time, and it has definitely cropped up within medical situations. In terms of any screenings involving your actual genitals, what I would do is I would still pack to the appointment to keep myself comfortable on the way there and whilst waiting there, but then when it gets to actually having to take your layers off, usually you're given a little bit of privacy, so if I had a backpack, I'd pop my backer in there, or sometimes I'd cheekily squish it in my pocket so that it's ready for me to pop it back in when I get dressed again. I've definitely had my groin examined a few times whilst I've been wearing briefs and packing, and whilst it feels like a really big deal to us, and it's kind of like, oh my god, are they gonna know? You've got to remember that doctors do this all the time and they're honestly not paying attention to that. I of course don't have experience on the trans feminine side of things, so I've not really spoken about that experience, but I'm sure there can be quite similar situations. So I hope this video is helpful, or at least a tad relatable. I think whilst all of these things are issues and the ignorance of doctors is really annoying, it's not something to put anybody off. Knowing all this wouldn't stop myself. It's more just that some people like to have the knowledge so that they're prepared for what they're going in for. Do let me know in the comments though if you think that I've missed anything so that you can share it with myself and everybody else in the community. Anyways, for now, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you want to keep updated, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.